Hi guys, welcome to another episode of What Am I Drinking with Azzopardi. Today I've got a Zinfandel from California, Mendocino, California, old wine, 2014. And because I chose a Californian wine, I want to rope in another topic, which is sulfites. Basically, we get a lot of questions about sulfites. Are sulfites the cause of your hangover the next day? Are they the cause of that headache that doesn't want to go away for about 2 or 3 days? In short, the brash answer is no. Unless French fries or canned soup, preserved jams or soft drinks are giving you a headache, then sulfites are definitely not the culprit. And I'll explain a little bit further. So, really and truly, 1% of the global population can be or are allergic to sulfites. So there are a certain type of hyperallergic people, they're called, and usually these are asthma sufferers and pretty severe asthma sufferers, and they can be pretty allergic to sulfites. And unfortunately, the reason behind this labeling system is back in the early 80s, there were 8 deaths which are somewhat linked to sulfites. And therefore the American government put in labeling for a certain amount of sulfites that you've got to label your product because of this link in deaths. However, I would like to point out that the link to deaths, the sulfite was actually from potatoes, not from wine. So what they used to do was they used to put potatoes in a bath of sulfites so that the potatoes would have a longer shelf life. And it was probably getting a little bit out of hand. But what are sulfites? So sulfites are actually just compounds that are part of the winemaking process. So in order to make wine, there will be sulfites present. That's a given. However, there are also added sulfites. So winemakers can add sulfites to the wine for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is longevity of the wine, so that the wine doesn't turn to vinegar within an hour of opening the bottle, for example, and gives it longer shelf life. The second reason for adding sulfites is actually to stop the fermentation. So if you want, for example, residual sugar in the bottle, in the wine, so you want a sweeter wine, then you can add sulfur or sulfites, and that will stop the fermentation. So those are the 2 reasons why you could have sulfites or added sulfites in your wine. But then there's another myth that I would like to debunk, maybe, that red wines give you more of a headache than white wines because of sulfites. It cannot be further from the truth. Reason being that actually red wines also have tannins, and tannins act as giving longevity to the wine, so therefore they would need less added sulfites than a white wine. So if anything, it is white wine that has more sulfites than red wine. And for the reason I said before, sweet wines would generally have more sulfites than dry wines. Using sulfites in wine is not something that is new. It stems back from the Roman times, and what they used to do back in the Roman times, they used to have candles made out of sulfur, so sulfur candles, and they used to actually light the candles in an empty amphora, so that the sulfur would remain in the amphora, and then they would fill it up with wine, and that would add longevity to the wine and shelf life to the wine. So this is something that dates back to hundreds and thousands of years. I would also like to add, actually, I think it's very important to know that in a supermarket wine, I'm speaking an everyday drinking wine, nothing spectacular and maybe not the cheapest of the crop, the quantity of sulfites there are in a bottle of wine is 200 parts per million. Now, when we mean parts per million at 200, if you compare that to, say, a packet of dried apricots, that's at around 3,000 parts per million sulfites added. So there's a huge difference over there. So unless the dried fruit is giving you a splitting headache, then it's definitely not the sulfites in the wine that's giving you the headache. Now that we've debunked the myth of sulfites, the reason for your headache is probably dehydration, not eating whilst drinking, too much drinking, and I think we've all gone down that road. Or it could potentially be cheap wine. When I mean cheap wine, I mean wine that is made using cheap techniques. So, for example, you can make a wine with flavors of oak by adding oak essence, or you can make wine with flavors of oak by aging it in an oak barrel. It's pretty obvious which one is going to give you the bigger headache the next day. Now, here we've got Ravenswood. This is a premium wine made by the winemaker Joel Peterson, and he is the self-proclaimed godfather of Zinfandel in California. So I'm really excited to see what this bottle of wine shows for us. Now, those that know Zinfandel also know that Zinfandel is the Primitivo grape. So it's actually a clone of the Primitivo grape, and the Primitivo grape is not actually indigenous to south of Italy. The origin is actually Croatia. That's just a fun little fact. However, pretty well known in California. It was probably one of the most important grapes in California. And this Joel Peterson probably brought Zinfandel to the worldwide map. And he put Zinfandel on the map from California. And he doesn't mince his words. He says that his wines pack a punch. And I mean, quote unquote, he says, we produce non-wimpy wine. So I'm expecting quite a blow over here. Back in the 80s, there was a certain Robert Parker, a highly acclaimed critic, and I would say probably the most influential man in wine to date, actually said that these Ravenswood wines, Zinfandels, are first class, bold, dramatic, and complex. And that's one hell of a compliment. Having said that, fast forward to today, these type of wines are not the most, I wouldn't like to say popular, but maybe they've decreased in popularity. These big, bold wines were extremely popular in the 90s and noughties, when Robert Parker was at his prime, maybe. Nowadays, people might want a little bit smoother, silkier wines. Having said that, Joel Peterson has stuck to his guns, and he carried on making these big, juicy wines, and for him, he believes that this is what Zinfandel should be. So, let's see what it's all about. 14.5% alcohol. Wow. Incredible. If you just look at the color, it's incredibly purple and juicy. I decanted this for an hour already, so I wanted to aerate it and give it a little bit of oxygen. On the nose, it's extremely intense, just as I expected. Still nice. Berries, I would say, a little bit of toast. The tannins are really pulling. Still really young, 2014. I've just been knocked by a truckload of berries and cherries and the oak and toast and smoke, and I've been whacked out of my seat with this. This is really fun. This is really cool. This is just mind-blowingly juicy. Good fun. Definitely not everyone's taste. I could imagine having this at a barbecue. It's definitely American and Californian and bigger and better and bolder. Wow, this really packs a punch. Good stuff. Cool. I like this. This is really American stuff. Guys, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. You can also have a look at my website, www.andrewazzopardi.net, or you can check out the business website, which is www.number12wines.com, and that's where we supply super yachts in Malta, Mallorca, and Barcelona. Wishing you a super day. Cheers!